little bit of what this is. Insulin potentiation therapy, called IPT because it's easier. It was developed by Donato Perez Garcia Sr., who was born in 1896, died in 1971. He developed this in 1932. It was called cellular therapy to change the biophysical, biochemical constants of the blood. And his son, Donato Perez Garcia y Bayón, who tragically died just in November, succeeded him and worked with him since 1955 until his father's death, and then through that until his own in 2000. And his son, the third generation, Donato Perez Garcia Jr., continues to this day working with the treatment in Tijuana. The way it developed, just a little, people say, well, who ever thought of using insulin for whatever? And good question. Dr. Perez, back in the 30s, he must have had some kind of irritable bowel syndrome. He was skinny, he had diarrhea all the time, abdominal cramps, whatever. And medicine of the time there didn't have anything that could help him. And then around 1928, 1930, whatever, he heard about insulin and got some and read the package insert or whatever it is that they had at that time. And it said it was indicated for the treatment of diabetes mellitus, for the inducement of insulin shock coma and treatment of schizophrenia, and for the use in non-diabetic malnutrition. And that was, he figured, well, I'm not diabetic and I'm malnourished, so he went ahead and he did some self-experimentation with it. He would eat and take massive, he took up like 80 units of insulin, sometimes IV. This is his own sort of phase 1 study. And so settled on something less than that down the road. And anyway, he got healthy and his gained weight and everything was fine. And then he went on to assume that insulin somehow or other assimilated things better. And one of the problems they had clinically at that time in medicine was syphilis. They couldn't get the mercury and arsenic salts, the salvarsan, to get through the blood-brain barrier in tertiary neurosyphilis. So patients with tertiary neurosyphilis didn't respond to salvarsan. And he took a bunch of dogs and gave them mercury and arsenic salts, and one group gave insulin, the other group he didn't, and he proved that insulin had breached the blood-brain barrier, and there was a concentration of mercury and arsenic salts in the brain was the same as the concentration in the blood in the insulin-treated group, and was nil in the non-insulin-treated group. And this was documented, marvelous documentation of patients with tabes dorsalis and general paresis of the insane, really advanced tertiary neurosyphilis, completely rehabilitated. 6 out of 9 patients in this one study at Austin State Hospital. So that's where it began, and then he started to expand it to use of all kinds of other diseases, not just cancer. Cancer didn't come along until 1947. I mentioned this year, Mexican military government replaced by a civilian government in 1939. He was surgeon lieutenant. He was actually he got up to be a general. He's the highest military medical person ever in the history of Mexico. And in 1939, the military government was replaced by a civilian government, and they purged the military, and his treatment went down the tubes with everything else. That's politics, baby. So the first application of IPT in cancer in 1947. Donato Perez Garcia Bayón came along in 1955. As I mentioned earlier, I discovered this in 1975 and became their scientific liaison. Donato Perez Garcia Jr. began treatment in 1983 after his graduation from medical school. Our first published article was in 1986. And as last told you, we went through this NCAM thing in September of 2000, which was a real bust. And subsequent to which I decided it was time for me to take this outside and teach it to other physicians who were interested in practicing this and doing something with it. And we are going to be doing a study with NIH. A fellow from NIH, a very prominent oncologist, called me after 25 years of me calling everybody else. Finally, this guy called me and said, we're going to do a study on this. And we were chatting away, and I said, he said, the protocol looks really good. I gave it to a biostatistician. He said it was a good thing. I said, well, that's better than the FDA. They told me it was too long and had a lot of problems with it. And he said, I can help you with that. Without even breaking it, I just said that, and boy, did that feel good. And I'm also doing this talk and some more in front of a group of physicians from Building 10 at the NIH campus in Bethesda, which is the hospital where they treat people. And that's an offshoot of this failed NCAM thing. The guy that got me there is still very interested in doing something with this, so he's going sort of doing a lateral arabesque and then over here to get me to talk to these doctors at NIH. And these are the guys that can leave the lecture room, walk down the hall, go to the clinic, and do it. So I'm very much into making this available. I think this is this is integrative medicine. This is building bridges. This is creating communitas in the medical profession. Medical profession is a good thing. We're here. We're the alternative guys. They're there. They're not the alternative guys. But as you saw yesterday at lunch, that magnificent talk with that cardiovascular surgeon about nutrition, things are changing. They really are, and I think it's great. Onward and upward.